The second invasion of Korea had been ruthless, and Japanese forces seemed unstoppable. The fall of Namwon and the disastrous defeat at Chilchonryang had shattered Korea's defenses. With Admiral Yi Sun-sin stripped of command, Japan controlled the seas, and Ming forces struggled to mount an effective response. The Korean court was in turmoil, and the people braced for the worst. Yet in this moment of crisis, the tide of war was about to shift. A battle-hardened admiral would return, an empire would make its stand, and the Japanese war machine would begin to crack under the weight of its own ambition. As the second invasion dragged on, the Ming dynasty committed larger forces to Korea, determined to prevent Japan from gaining a foothold in the north. General Ma Gui led a major campaign to push the invaders back, but early clashes revealed just how formidable Japan's army remained. One of the first major confrontations, the Battle of Hwangseoksan, ended in disaster for the Allies. Ming and Korean forces, attempting to reclaim the fortress, were met with fierce resistance and suffered heavy casualties. The loss was a harsh lesson. Japan's battlefield tactics were still superior in open combat. However, the turning point came at the Battle of Jiksan, September 1597, the first time the Ming army successfully halted a Japanese advance. Unlike at Hwangseoksan, the Ming forces under Ma Gui and Liu Ting fought a defensive engagement using cavalry and firearms effectively. The battle ended in a strategic stalemate, forcing the Japanese to retreat and reconsider their offensive strategy. Despite Hideyoshi's demand for relentless aggression, fractures within the Japanese leadership deepened. Konishi Yukinaga still pushed for negotiations, warning that a prolonged war would exhaust their resources. Kato Kayomasa and Shimazu Yoshihiro, on the other hand, favored continued aggression, believing that Japan had come too far to retreat. Meanwhile, supplies were dwindling, and morale among the samurai was deteriorating. Many soldiers, having expected a swift victory, now found themselves in an endless war of attrition. Hideyoshi, growing more impatient, issued harsh orders from Osaka, demanding further offensives despite the worsening conditions on the front. This internal discord, combined with Korea and Ming's growing resistance, put Japan in a precarious position. With Japan dominating the seas after Wongyun's disastrous defeat at Chilchonryang, Korea's survival depended on a miracle. That miracle came in the form of Yi Sun-sin's reinstatement. When King Seonjo realized the full extent of Wongyun's failure, he had no choice but to restore Yi Sun-sin as supreme commander of the navy. What the admiral found upon his return was devastating. Of the once mighty Korean navy, only 12 warships remained. But Yi refused to surrender. Rallying his remaining forces, he devised a daring plan that would go down as one of the greatest naval victories in history. On October 26, 1597, Admiral Yi Sun-sin led his fleet into the treacherous waters of the Myeongnyang Strait, where the tides were strong enough to turn the battle in his favor. The Japanese, confident in their overwhelming numbers, over 300 warships, sailed into the strait, expecting to crush Yi's tiny fleet. Instead, Yi used the narrow passage to funnel the enemy, neutralizing their numerical advantage. As the tide shifted, the Japanese ships were thrown into disarray, colliding with one another. Yi's remaining 12 warships struck with brutal efficiency, sinking dozens of enemy vessels while suffering almost no losses. The Japanese fleet, leaderless and demoralized, was forced into retreat. Against all odds, Yi had single-handedly restored Korean control over the sea. The victory at Myeongnyang was more than just a battle. It was a message that Korea would not fall so easily. Despite their catastrophic defeat at Myeongnyang, Japanese forces still held key positions on land. Hideyoshi's commanders doubled down on fortifications, preparing for a prolonged war. However, with supply lines in jeopardy and resistance growing stronger, the cracks in Japan's campaign became more visible. The Ming and Korean armies began reclaiming territory, and Japan found itself increasingly isolated. With Hideyoshi's health declining and his war machine faltering, an endgame was beginning to take shape. The Battle of Myeongnyang proved that Korea was far from defeated, but Japan still held strongholds, and Hideyoshi's dream of conquest had not yet crumbled. Would the Allied forces be able to break Japan's grip on Korea? And how would the war's greatest commanders shape its final days? Stay tuned as we march toward the dramatic conclusion of the Imjin War. Like, comment and subscribe to ensure history's greatest battles are never forgotten. Or don't. Thanks for watching.